Law school applications are surging right now. This is the biggest increase in about 15 years. I saw the same thing happen back in 2008. Applications spiked, law schools filled their seats and took people's money, and then the bottom fell out. Graduates could not find jobs. They were six figures in debt with no path forward, and I'm worried that a lot of you might be falling into the exact same trap. I've been teaching the LSAT for over 20 years now, and I've watched these cycles play out time and time again. And what concerns me about this particular spike is not that applications are up, but it's why they're up. Almost nobody is talking about the one factor that actually is driving most of this surge, and it's got nothing to do with politics. I'm going to break down the numbers, the real cause, and three scenarios that are about to play out depending on what happens with the economy. And the third one is the one that should probably worry you. But first, the numbers. LSAC reported early in the 2026 cycle that applicants were up 33% year over year. Applications were up 27% year over year. And of course, early cycle data is kind of noisy. But as more numbers came in through November and December, the trend held up. Applications still up over 20%, applicants up nearly 25%, and that's not a blip. 179 law schools saw increases in applicant numbers, only 16 saw decreases. The Mountain West region was up 46%, New England was up 27%. Applicants scoring in the 175 to 180 range on the LSAT are up 25%, meaning the pool is bigger and it's also stronger. And so if you're applying to law school right now, you are competing against more people who are bringing higher scores. And of course, the schools are seeing those higher numbers and they're acting on them. And most of the coverage in the mainstream media points to politics as the driver. One survey found 56% of admissions officers saying the political environment was the major driver. And of course, yes, every politically charged moment pushes law school applications up. It happened in 2016 and again in 2020, same thing's happening now. But politics is not the main story. Economists are using the term rolling recession to describe what's happening right now because some parts of the economy are fine, others not so much. Now, the parts that are struggling happen to be the industries that hire the most college graduates. Tech, of course, has pulled back on hiring significantly, so have finance, professional services, and consulting. And the data backs this up. The New York Fed reported that unemployment for recent college graduates aged 22 to 27 hit 5.7% at the end of 2025, highest since 2013, outside the pandemic. And of course, the underemployment number is worse. That measures graduates who have jobs, but jobs that don't require a college degree. That number hit 42.5%, meaning nearly half of recent college graduates are working in roles they didn't need their degree for. And so 4 years of college, graduating with debt, a diploma, and a coin flip chance, you end up in a job that doesn't use any of it. Now, Goldman Sachs found that from 2023 to 2025, industries that primarily hire college graduates were losing an average of 9,000 jobs per month. Not gaining, but losing. The industries that hire workers without degrees were still adding jobs during that same period. And so you've got a 22-year-old with a poli-sci degree that can't get hired. A 25-year-old laid off from a tech company isn't getting callbacks. And so where do they go? They go to grad school. And for a huge number of them, they're going to law school. So the job market is actually the biggest single factor behind this employment surge. It's the factor most media coverage is underplaying, and it should concern you because when people go to law school to escape a bad economy, rather than because they want to practice law, bad things happen. We saw that happen after 2008, and I'm going to come back to that because the job market is not the only force at work. There are several different things converging, which is why this cycle looks so extreme. Of course, artificial intelligence is reshaping white-collar work, and so a lot of young professionals are looking at law as a career that feels more durable. Of course, whether that's true is a second question, but the perception is still changing behavior anyway. And so a lot of folks are reapplying to law school. Last cycle was already pretty brutal, and a lot of qualified people either didn't get in or they held off on applying when they saw the numbers, and they're back this cycle adding volume on top of new applicant growth. And of course, the LSAT testing pipeline keeps growing as well. August 2025 had about 26,000 test takers, up about 18% from the year before, and up nearly 60% from 2 years ago. September LSAT takers were up 24%, October test takers up 16%. And so when LSAT testing volume runs that high, application volume is going to follow within months. And so a bad job market for graduates, political energy driving interest in law, anxiety about AI replacing white-collar jobs, a backlog of reapplicants from last cycle, and a growing test taker pipeline all hitting at once. That's why the numbers look the way they do. Now, a lot of people are asking me what happens if we hit a full-on recession, a broad-based economic downturn. And of course, I'm not predicting a recession. I'm not an economist, but the question keeps coming up. And I think you got to understand what history tells us. There are three different potential scenarios that could play out. Scenario one is no recession. Let's say the economy stabilizes, geopolitical tensions ease up, applicant numbers probably flatten, things are still competitive, still elevated, but the growth stops accelerating. That's probably your best case scenario if you're applying to law school in the next couple of years. Scenario number two, a short-term recession where we have a few months of contraction, maybe for a quarter or two. If that happens, you can expect another spike in applications on top of what we're already seeing, where people lose jobs, grad school becomes the default. That's what happens every single time. And so in that scenario, the current surge gets even bigger. Then scenario three, a prolonged recession, and that would be the most impactful scenario. If we follow the same pattern as the Great Recession, you get an initial spike, just like we saw in 2008 and 2009, when applications surged because people were running away from a terrible job market. And so law schools filled their seats. But then the floor dropped out. After 2010, law school applications fell every single year for 5 straight years. By 2013, they were down over 13% year over year. That is a free fall scenario. The people who had enrolled during the spike graduated into a legal market that had also contracted. So they borrowed money to escape one bad economy and walked right into another one. Only 44% of Great Recession law grads said they had a good job waiting at graduation. A quarter said it took more than a year to find one, and 60% had borrowed over $100,000. Meanwhile, law schools raised tuition nearly 30% between 2008 and 2015. Prices went up during a collapse in demand, and so student debt spiked over 50%. Now, nobody talks about this part during spike. During the surge, all the conversation is about how hard it is to get in. Nobody asks what happens to the people who get in at the wrong time. And so the question is, are we in the early phase of another one of these cycles? Now, I don't know. Of course, I hope we don't. But the sooner things stabilize geopolitically, the less likely it becomes. But if you're about to make a 6-figure decision about your future, you've got to know the history. And so what do? If you are applying this cycle, you've got to know what you're walking into. Schools have a deeper and stronger applicant pool than they have had in 20 years. Some law schools are using the demand to reduce scholarship offers. But despite that, your LSAT score will still carry more weight now than it has in a very long time, and it's the number one tool you have in your arsenal. And so if your LSAT score is below where you want it to be, I would seriously encourage you to consider retaking the LSAT before you apply, because if you have a below median score in this cycle, it's an especially bad move. If you could wait one more cycle to retake, it's almost always better. Now, if you're thinking about law school mainly because you can't find a job, of course, I understand the impulse, but you want to make sure you're choosing law school because you actually want to practice law. The people who got hurt worst after the Great Recession were the ones who enrolled during the spike for the wrong reasons. They didn't want to be lawyers. They just wanted to not be unemployed. But those are very different motivations. And 3 years later, that difference showed up in their outcomes. So right now, we're probably in scenario one or the early stages of scenario two. But if the economy shifts, we could be looking at something bigger. And so the decisions you make in the next 6 to 12 months about whether to apply, where to apply, how much debt to take on, those will play out over the rest of your career. Now, if you're applying to this cycle, I want to hear what you're seeing out there. Drop a comment. Do you think we're in a pretty flat economic situation? Do you think we're in a spike or a spike followed by a crash? What are you reading in the news? I'm curious to hear. I don't have all the answers. I'm just making predictions based on what I read and what I see. Now, if you want help building a strategy around your LSAT prep and strengthening your applications in a cycle this competitive, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That is an open offer. What we do during those tutoring lessons is we look at where you're currently scoring, what your goal score is, and we help you map out an action plan to get you from your current standing to your goal score on your time frame. And for those just joining, I offer these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them, and LSAT's kind of a niche topic. But although not that many people care about the LSAT, those who do care tend to care pretty deeply, and so I'm happy to support you in this and give you whatever guidance and feedback I can. Feel free to drop a question in. I see John's asking what LSAT score I got. So I started off at a 152, ended up with a 175. It took me an entire year, though, and at least half of that was a complete waste of time. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months, because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And once you can do that, everything changes. And so that's what I help my students with in our LSAT Unplugged coaching programs. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We personalize every program to the individual student, considering your current LSAT score if you've taken a practice test, your goal LSAT score, and your time frame. Because your LSAT study plan will look very different if you're taking the LSAT in 1 week or so versus 1 month or 1 year or anything in between. I have folks coming to me in the final home stretch before the April test, and my biggest and best advice would be, if you're not close to your goal, consider pushing it back. If you could push it back from April to June, give yourself an additional 2 months, you give yourself that much more space and time to improve your score significantly. And the LSAT score is the most important factor in the law school admissions process. It weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined. Kind of crazy how a single day of 2.5 hours could weigh more heavily than 3 to 4 years of undergrad, but that's just how the system's designed. And I don't fight or argue about the design of the system. I just work within it, because we're not going to change how law schools make their decisions, but we can change the strength of your application. And you could change your score radically in just 8 weeks. You could change the entire trajectory of the rest of your legal career by getting yourself into a better law school, getting yourself more scholarship money. It all comes down to getting yourself a higher score. And I see Duncan's asking, what's the average LSAT score? The average score is around a 151 or so, but you don't want average, right? Because average scores yield average results. And in fact, an average LSAT score yields a worse than average result, because the people who get the worst scores end up not even applying. So you have your pool of LSAT takers and you have your pool of law school applicants. Typically, those with the worst LSAT scores don't bother applying because they know they wouldn't get in. So those who have higher LSAT scores are disproportionately likely to apply, and those with lower LSAT scores are disproportionately unlikely to apply. And so what you don't want an average LSAT score. You ideally want an LSAT score above the medians of the schools to which you're applying. So let's say you want to go to a top 14 law school like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU. These are the top ranked law schools, essentially the Ivy League of law schools. Their LSAT medians are ranging from 170 to 174, meaning half of their students got above that range, half got below. And so consider their GPA medians are roughly a 3.9. And so if you want to get into Harvard Law and your GPA is below a 3.9, you want to have a relatively higher LSAT score above a 174 to compensate. An average score of 151 is not going to do it. Certainly not for Harvard and not for most law schools worth attending, in my opinion. An average LSAT score might get you in somewhere, but wouldn't necessarily get you into a law school worth attending, and not with LSAT, with law school scholarship money. J-Max saying, this is so sad, bro. I mean, you could say it's sad, but you could also say, well, I'm going to use that as motivation to push for a higher score. The numbers are the numbers, and they may not be what you wanted to hear. You might have been hoping that you could get in with lower numbers, but I'd rather dash your dreams now than have you find out the hard way later after applying. Because if you learn now, earlier, you can take some concrete action steps to improve your situation. I wouldn't want you applying to Harvard Law with a mediocre LSAT score and a mediocre GPA wasting money on their application fees because you certainly probably want the money more than they do. You probably need it more than they do. They've got billion-dollar endowments, right? And I don't want you to waste 6 months of your life waiting to hear back on a crapshoot. I would instead say, if your GPA is below the medians, let's get you a higher LSAT score to compensate. But in my opinion, based on what I've seen in my experience from my students and from just reading the ABA 509 reports, you can see for yourself, if you're below the GPA medians, you want to be above the LSAT medians. And your GPA is probably pretty fixed at this point in time because most folks watching this are probably at the end of undergrad, if not already graduated. And so while your GPA may be fixed, you've still got plenty of room to improve your LSAT score, to improve your odds of getting in. And if you have more detailed or personal questions, you want to talk through your situation. I see Luke is asking some more nuanced questions here. The best way to get those addressed is to book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link to book that free tutoring is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I try to keep my answers to these questions on the lives broad to help out as many folks as possible, help out the greatest number of people, trying to scale one to many here. But if you're looking for more personal guidance, getting on a one-on-one call with me is the best way to get your more personal questions addressed. I see Muchak is asking, do you need to take a pre-law program to take the LSAT? No, you can actually take the LSAT there with any major, any program. There are no prerequisites for taking the LSAT. You can major in literally anything and take the LSAT. You could theoretically take the LSAT without even being in college. You could be a high school student theoretically and take the LSAT. They're not going to ban you from doing it. Keep in mind that the LSAT score is good for 5 years, though. And so if you're a freshman in high school, your score would probably expire before you apply to law school. I would typically recommend taking the LSAT towards the end of college, if not recently upon graduating. I see Jay Formby's asking, I sit currently at a 147 LSAT, and I didn't study much. Can I realistically go up 10 points before I take it again in October? So you want to go from a 147 to a 157 by October in roughly 6 months? That's plenty of time. I would think that you could improve 10 points a lot sooner than that, or you could improve more than 10 points by October. We've got folks in our programs looking to improve 10 points by June, which I think is also quite doable. I mean, roughly 1 point a week or so. Starting in the 140s range is very reasonable. Of course, easier to go from a 147 to a 157 than to go from a 167 to a 177. I see Pretty Girls asking, is your undergrad GPA or graduate GPA considered for admissions? So for law school admissions purposes, they only consider your undergraduate GPA. Your graduate GPA is not factored into their calculations because not everybody has one. Then they want to do more of an apples to apples comparison. And so for that reason, they look at your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score, and they calculate those in a formula called the admissions index to calculate your chances, for lack of a better word. Of course, they do look at the essays and the resume and the rec letters and all of that, but law school admissions is primarily numbers driven because of the US News rankings. So don't over-index on your graduate GPA. They'll see it for context, but the undergrad GPA is what matters. And that's what you want to measure yourself against when looking at the medians. Hillary's asking where to find the median GPAs. You go on the American Bar Association website, look at the ABA 509 reports. So you Google Yale Law School 509 or Harvard Law School 509 or whatever law school you're looking at, whether you want to go to, and look at the GPA median, the LSAT median, and see how you stack up. If you're below on one median, you want to be above on the other. Ashton says, I got waitlisted at Fordham Law. I need to improve my LSAT. That's my weak link. Okay, well, you know what you got to do. And the good news is, if your LSAT's the number that you got to improve, I mean, the LSAT's offered 8 times a year. Coming up, we've got the April LSAT in 1 week. Too late for that, of course. So deadline's already passed, but you've got the June LSAT coming up in 2 months, the August LSAT in roughly 4 months, September, October, November, all coming up as well. You could take any one of those LSATs and apply to law school this fall. Plenty of time to improve for June in particular. 2 months is plenty of time, not too late. I see M is asking, I had a 3.749 GPA in college. Awfully specific. Could be round to 3.75 for simplicity, right? Is that a good for a T14? Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, it's good in that it's within spitting distance. Unfortunately, because of ridiculous grade inflation, a 3.749 or a 3.75 GPA is technically below the medians for the T14. Their medians are all roughly around a 3.9, and so you will technically be a little bit below on the GPA median, but you can balance it out by getting a higher LSAT score to compensate. So that's where I would focus efforts at this stage. F is asking, are there schools without the LSAT needed? Yeah, there are some law schools that technically will allow you to apply without an LSAT score on record, but very, very few people get in without an LSAT score. In other words, a large number of law schools admit almost nobody without an LSAT, but they allow for the possibility in case they've got some, Fulbright scholar or Rhodes scholar walking in with incredible background. But for most folks, you're going to want to have the LSAT score on record because they want to see that you got what it takes to succeed in law school and on the bar exam. If you apply without the LSAT, the question is, why did you not take the LSAT? It becomes kind of a bit of a red flag, right? They want to know that you got what it takes to succeed. They don't want to take people who are going to be at risk of dropping out of law school or failing the bar exam because that's how they're evaluated themselves. The LSAT is considered a valid and reliable admissions test because it is strongly correlated with the first-year law school grades as well as bar passage rates. And when you apply without an LSAT score, you're saying, I didn't want to risk getting a low score. And they're like, well, were you likely to get a low score? If so, should we take you? And also, consider that when you apply with a good LSAT score, you're also giving them reason to give you more scholarship money. Because when you apply with strong numbers, you become an attractive candidate to help them boost their standing in the US News rankings. With a higher LSAT score, you will give them reason to incentivize you to attend by giving you more scholarship money. Without the LSAT score, what incentive is there? Not a whole lot of one. Of course, you have your GPA, but a lot of folks have great GPAs. A lot of folks have GPAs higher than yours, most likely. Like I said, the top 14 law schools have GPA medians of 3.9, and even in the top 20, top 30, they're still not much lower than that. And again, grade inflation is universal, meaning that lots of folks from different universities with different easy majors have top grades, and so a top GPA doesn't really tell them a whole lot. A top GPA in STEM might tell them something, of course, but because STEM majors are curved, typically that's pretty hard to achieve. Emery's asking, what is the best way to inflate your GPA? I'm still an undergrad. Yeah, that is the question, right? You got to fight fire with fire and play the game, right? So what you'd want to do is you'd want to take classes where you can get an easy A. I hate saying that because I feel like you should be able to go to college to actually learn something versus just trying to game the system for the next stage of the process. But I also understand that if law school admissions is your sole purpose, your sole goal, then all else being equal, that would be the rational thing to do, right? You'd take classes where you could get easy A's. I took a class in college. It was a philosophy class, and the professor didn't believe in grades, so he gave everybody A's. Literally give everybody A's. Is that measuring what you learned in the class? I don't think so, but an A is an A. Ideally, you'd find a way to do both where you take classes that legitimately interest you and also you can get a good grade. And so you would look at ratemyprofessors.com, for example, and see which professors are known for giving out easier grades. I would avoid STEM classes because they're more brutally curved and that would hurt your grades, but humanities tend not to curve in the same way. Mateo's asking, is there enough free information online for LSAT prep or is paying mandatory? I actually think there's more free information online than ever before. I'm part of that, right? With the YouTube channel and doing these lives and such, right? So for those who are just joining, aside from doing these daily lives on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and such, I also have a YouTube channel called LSAT Unplugged where you can find all the recordings of all my previous lives, literally hundreds of them. I also have plenty of other videos on the channel covering every topic on both LSAT prep and law school admissions, and so you can access all of that for free. It's all on the LSAT Unplugged podcast as well. So I don't think you need to pay for information. But what folks do tend to pay for is guidance and support and feedback live, because when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know if you're studying the right way, if you're studying efficiently. And so usually what we find is that when we add some support into the mix for the first time for someone who hasn't had that guidance before, there's usually some pretty quick wins and a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so if you're looking for some pointers, if you're not sure if you're studying the right way, it might be worthwhile to get some private coaching. And I'm not even charging for the first session with me. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. We'll talk through where you're currently at, what your goal score is, and how to get there on your time frame based on whenever you're taking the LSAT. And so if you want to book that free tutoring with me, the link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Bershka's asking, is 2 months enough time to study? And so counting from today, I guess that you were aiming at the June LSAT, right? 2 months is enough time, but it's also the minimum that I would recommend. I would say typically minimum 2 to 3 months to study, ideally giving yourself closer to 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. You could maybe knock it out sooner depending on how much time you're able and willing to devote per day and per week, but I would say 2 months is the absolute minimum. And of course, it depends on where you're currently at and what your goals are. If you're brand new to the LSAT and you want a 180, you might want to give it more than 2 months if you're studying part-time. If you could study full-time, you can improve more, of course, but I would say given the importance of the LSAT, I wouldn't try to rush it if you're looking for a top score. I would give it closer to 4 to 5 months or so. And you've got 2 months till June, but as a backup, you could take it in August and then apply the second applications open in September when it's easier to get in more scholarship money when you apply at the beginning of the cycle. I wouldn't go for January or February as LSAT target test dates right now because there's no reason to wait that long. You can knock it out sooner, and you should knock it out sooner. But I can't say how long it'll take for any particular student to reach a particular score of 180 or 170s, of course, because everyone's got different abilities and different aptitude, different time they're putting in per day and per week, and different methods of studying. The question is, are you self-studying with textbooks and videos, or are you getting some more personalized guidance or support? The more help you get, the more you're going to improve. Of course, not saying you can't go it alone, but all else being equal, the way I look at it is, are you more or less likely to get there with support? I would think more support could only help. And so if you want some help, again, I'm offering the tutoring for free. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I see K. Josh is asking, 3.2 undergrad GPA, 4.0 grad level GPA. Is law school out of the question before attempting the LSAT? So no, law school is not out of the question. The 3.2 undergrad GPA is what they will consider, of course. But if you get a sufficiently high LSAT score, that could do a lot to offset a low GPA. So your destiny is not preordained. You can change your chances by getting a higher LSAT score to compensate for what will be a lower GPA. And of course, I don't think you'll get into all of the T14 based on with a 3.2 undergrad GPA, even if you had a 180, but you might have a spitting shot at a decent chance of getting in somewhere, even to a great school, provided that you can get a high LSAT score. I see Harrison's asking, realistically, could I go to law school with just a degree in finance? Yeah, you can major in literally anything and go to law school. Law schools don't care what you majored in. There are no prerequisites for going to law school. You just want to have a BA in something. Finance is fine for that. You want to have good numbers, good LSAT score, good GPA. Hillary's asking, how much should we plan to spend on prep and tutoring for the LSAT? There's no one-size-fits-all answer to this. I want to personalize every program to the individual student, considering your current starting point, your goals, and your time frame. But we always want to personalize the program to the individual student to get you to your goals, and we're also conscious of financial constraints. And so we do offer financing and payment plans if you wanted to do installments. The best way to figure out a plan for you is to book the free tutoring with me, and we could talk through your situation to figure out what plan makes the most sense for you. And that's, again, a free, no obligation call with me. You could book it through the link in my bio. I see Kayla's asking, is it too late to apply to law school in April? It's not too late to apply now, but do keep in mind that when you apply at the tail end of the cycle, it is a little bit harder to get in, and there is less scholarship money available. At the same time, we got to balance that with the opportunity cost of waiting an entire year. And so just keep that in mind. You could apply now, see what kind of offers you get. And then if you don't get number of offers that you like, you then push it back a year, retake the LSAT, apply in the fall, and you'll have better odds at that stage. Because then you'll have higher numbers, stronger LSAT score, and you'll be applying at the beginning of the cycle instead. I see Heiser throws asking, I'm looking to apply for a hybrid program and to start law school in fall 2027. Do you have any advice on looking for internships and jobs after graduation? So I'm guessing that you have a gap year between undergrad and law school and you're looking to fill that time. And you're going to apply to law school in this fall of 2026 to start law school fall 2027. I mean, if that's the case, my first thought is rather than looking for internships and jobs, get a higher LSAT score. I mean, you haven't yet applied yet. Applications don't open until the fall for those starting law school in fall 2027. So my thought is first and foremost, get the strongest possible numbers. Law schools care a lot more about your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score than your internships and jobs and resume and all of that. And even if you've taken the LSAT, why not retake it and get a higher score, better numbers? The hybrid programs are really competitive right now because everybody wants to do them. There are way more students who want to go to law school online or hybrid than there are seats available. I can't tell you how many students I hear from every single day saying, I want to go to St. Mary's in Texas or Syracuse or Mitchell Hamlin. It's funny because these schools would not be noteworthy otherwise. These are not super high ranked schools, but there are a few of the schools that were early in getting accreditation from the ABA to offer education online, so everybody wants to go there. And the thing is that these schools actually have very few seats available for the online side of things because these are early stage pilot programs. They don't want to have issues with quality control due to too many students at the early stages of the program. And so they are taking in very few people. The requirements for these hybrid programs are a lot higher than they would be to go to that law school in person. And so if you want to do hybrid or online, keep in mind that the numbers you need might be higher than what you're seeing in the general ABA 509 reports for the schools as a whole. And so if you want to go hybrid or online, even more reason to shoot for higher numbers on the LSAT and higher numbers on the GPA. Don't waste your time on extracurriculars and internships. That doesn't matter nearly as much for law school admissions as it does for undergrad admissions. So first and foremost, focus on getting those LSAT numbers. I see Luke is asking, are the questions in your TikToks how they appear on the LSAT? So for a while, I've been publishing LSAT drill questions on my TikToks and IG and YouTube shorts. Those are meant to be easy beginner level drills. Those are not official LSAT questions. Unfortunately, I can't publish videos containing actual LSAT questions due to copyright. Don't want to get sued or shut down here. And so those are just easy beginner level drills meant to be more accessible to those who are pretty new to the LSAT, but actual LSAT questions are, of course, a lot more difficult than those, which is why after having done hundreds of those, I've changed it up. And now what I'm focusing on is I'm actually explaining official LSAT reading comprehension passages from the previously administered LSAT exams. I can't display those questions on screen because of copyright, but I am explaining the passages themselves in my lives and in my videos. And so if you have any requests for particular reading comp passages you want me to prioritize covering, just drop those in the chat or shoot me a DM. And if enough folks ask for them, I'll move those earlier in the queue. But it is a new project of mine to explain every single LSAT reading comp passage. About, I guess it was 15 years ago now or so, I actually explained over 1,000 logical reasoning questions. That was before I was focused on the YouTube channel, so those are in print form. I also did logic games explanations for approximately 180 official logic games. Did those back in 2012 or so, but logic games are no longer on the LSAT. And so as much as I love logic games, there's no point in talking about them because it wouldn't really help anybody. So I've since shifted focus, now focusing on reading comprehension for a bit. And of course, after LSAC removed logic games about a year and a half, 2 years ago, We purged all logic games material from our courses in coaching, and we've added a lot more on logical reasoning because for those who aren't aware, LSAC removed the logic games section and added a second scored section of logical reasoning to the exam. And so any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across the two sections, but you don't want to sleep on reading comp either because it's a whole third of the test. And a lot of folks will say you can't improve at reading comprehension, but they're totally wrong. You can improve it significantly at reading comp because the good news is that LSAT reading comp is unlike reading comp on the SAT or the ACT. It's not content-based. It is based on arguments, how LSAC goes about making their argument, how they structure the argument. And so because a lot of other LSAT programs neglect reading comp, I wanted to give it a bit more attention for the next couple of months. And so I'll be explaining every LSAT reading comp passage on YouTube and TikTok during my lives. That'll be a separate live from the live I do at 2 p.m. Eastern, though. For those who aren't aware, I'm doing these lives every single weekday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. But these are, of course, the interactive Q&As that I like to do. But separately, I'm also doing a live explaining LSAT reading comp. I'll be doing that as a separate live. See, Thomas is asking, do you want to be the next SNL cast member? Are you offering? Yeah, reach out, DM me. Milan's asking, how much does the undergrad school rank and the difficulty of classes taken matter? Doesn't really matter a whole lot because law schools are not evaluated based on that metric. Law schools are evaluated based on your LSAT score and your GPA. And so those are the numbers that law schools have to report to the ABA, and US News then pulls those numbers for inclusion in the US News rankings. But the prestige of your undergrad is not taken into consideration by US News, and the difficulty of the classes you took is also not taken into consideration. And I mean, really, how would law schools evaluate the difficulty of the classes that you took? There are thousands of colleges and universities, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different classes, different professors. How would law schools get a comprehensive view of the difficulty of each individual class? I can't see how they would evaluate that or calculate that. So they don't. I mean, as an analogous situation here, I mean, law schools don't even look at the transcripts of bachelor's degrees earned outside North America. Meaning if you went to undergrad in Europe or Africa or Asia or Latin America or wherever, law schools don't even bother to evaluate your transcript. They just say, we're not going to bother trying to figure out what your grades mean because you earned your bachelor's in another country. So they put it as a big X or a big question mark. They ignore it and they focus instead on your LSAT score. Like they're too lazy to even figure it out. And I get it because as big as North America is, imagine how big the world is with nearly 200 countries. They're not going to bother looking into all these different countries and different universities. So instead, they just say, forget your undergraduate degree, forget your GPA. We're going to only look at your LSAT score and place that much more weight on it. And so they do consider your GPA if you earned it in the US to some extent, but they're discounting it because grade inflation is so ridiculously out of control. And the LSAT score is not perfect either. There's LSAT score inflation as well. But GPA inflation is worse. And so they devote some space to evaluating your GPA and more space than that devoted to your LSAT score. Thomas says, I have potential for SNL is going to send a message. Awesome. Maybe you'll all be seeing me on SNL in the future. Aces is asking, how important is your personal statement when applying for law school? It matters. I mean, don't treat it like a joke. Don't have AI write your personal statement. Write it yourself. Make sure it's in your own voice. But that being said, of course, spell check is good. Grammarly is good. Having other people read it is good. Get some different perspectives on it. Go through round after round after round of edits to make it as tight as possible. As a starting point, I typically recommend making your rough draft roughly 3 times the length of your final draft. So in other words, if you want your personal statement to be 500 words in final version, roughly 2 pages double spaced, make your rough draft, your initial rough draft, approximately 1,500 words, and then cut it down little by little by little. with round after round of revisions. Ideally, you print it out and you go over it with a red pen, cross things out, underline things, make adjustments to it, tighten it up over time. That being said, of course, your LSAT score is more important, so don't perfect your admissions essays and have your LSAT score be garbage. Make your LSAT score as strong as possible. Work on your personal statement and other essays on the side, and then aim to have it all done by the time your LSAT score comes back and you could hit submit. Your LSAT score takes about 2 to 3 weeks to come back, meaning let's say you take the LSAT in early August, you get your LSAT score back in late August, you've then got most of the month of August to work on your essays. And then, of course, it's not just the personal statement, it's also your addenda, your resume, optional essays, diversity or adversity statement. Work on all of those side by side, have other people look at them. And then the second your LSAT score comes back into the month, you can hit submit when applications open September 1st or September 15th. Tom is saying, I don't care where I go to law school, preferably a state school, but I just don't want to pay for it. Well, the good news is you don't have to pay for it. What most people don't realize is that very, very few people pay the sticker price for law school. And if you are the one who pays sticker price, you are subsidizing all of your classmates. Very generous of you to do that, right? But I think it's better if you are the one who gets subsidized. And the way that you get scholarship money, the way that you don't pay for law school is by getting numbers that are significantly above the medians of the schools to which you're applying. If your LSAT score and your GPA are sufficiently high, ideally if you have both of them above the medians of the schools to which you're applying, law schools will reward you and incentivize you to choose to attend their school because you will help them raise their standing in the rankings. Now, why do the US News rankings matter? It's because the higher a school is in the rankings, the more applicants they can attract in future years and the more donations they can solicit from their alumni. In other words, if the school can show they're doing well, that will help them get their alumni to donate more money, and it will help them attract more students in the future by showing off the prestige of the school. So if you are willing to go to a lower ranked law school with more scholarship money, then you could potentially avoid having to pay anything at all. And there are many people every single year who pay $0 for law school. They take out no loans, and even beyond paying $0, you can also get your room and board covered. You can get your bar exam prep fees covered ideally. You could get a living stipend, provided that your numbers are strong enough, of course. Not everybody gets that. You could also get half off your tuition or a third off your tuition. The one thing you want to avoid is conditional scholarships, because while they sound really good in theory, they're hypothetical, or they are contingent on you meeting certain conditions that you may not be able to meet. If they offer half the class a scholarship that requires you be in the top third of the class, they're dooming 70% of people to failure. And nobody thinks they're going to be the unlucky ones. But if you have a family crisis or a personal issue or a health issue, that could prevent you from achieving good grades. And then through no fault of your own, you could be getting lower grades than you expected. And that's going to leave you with a pretty hefty bill. So I would recommend that you go for unconditional scholarships where there are no conditions attached requiring you to maintain a certain GPA. Then there are folks who are veterans who have the GI Bill paying for law school. That's also a pretty great outcome. I see ACES is commenting about that. And so in that case, if you are former military and the GI Bill is covering it, then you don't have to choose a lower ranked school for scholarship money. You can go to the best law school you can get into, and the government's still going to pay for it. Pretty optimal outcome as well. Of course, not everyone's in that position. But regardless, getting a higher LSAT score will help you get more scholarship money and help you get into better law schools. And for those just joining and aren't aware, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. During that free tutoring lesson, we can look at where you're currently at with your LSAT prep, where you want to get to, what your LSAT goals are, and how to get there on your time frame. So if you want to book that free tutoring with me, the link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I'll be back tomorrow for the regular daily live, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them, so I do appreciate your support spreading the word. I'll see you all tomorrow. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.